There is a house by a lake that breathes like a sleeping creature. In the daylight it is only a modest wooden shape at the edge of the water, its roof the color of wet stone, its windows a quiet gray. But when the light thins and the day loosens its hold, the house takes a long, slow breath. The boards relax, the curtains lift a little. The brass kettle hums to itself as if remembering an old lullaby. The lake notices and returns the greeting with a small ripple that kisses the pier. On the first evening of autumn, Mara arrives with a small suitcase and a larger silence. She has come here to rest, though she does not use that word. Rest, to her, has always sounded like a task to be completed. She prefers to say nothing at all. She unlocks the door and steps into the hush that belongs to old wood and patient rooms. Dust makes a faint silver in the slant of late sun. Somewhere, a pine leans and straightens, as pines do, like a thought that has not decided whether to stay or go. Mara sets her suitcase by the bed and opens every window. The air that comes in is green and clean, fretted with the scent of damp bark. She stands in it as if it were music and lets it pass through her. The floorboards creak kindly beneath her feet, acknowledging her without questions. On the shelf by the kitchen window, the kettle waits. She touches its handle and hears the soft ring of metal, a sound like the far edge of a bell. When she fills the kettle at the sink, the water runs clear and cold, a ribbon of lake drawn into the house. She lights the flame and watches it, not because she needs to but because the small blue tongue of it steadies her. When the kettle begins to tremble, she lowers the heat and listens to its first murmurs. Steam threads up in a single pale line and disappears, the way worry sometimes does when observed with gentle attention. Outside, the light continues to soften. The hills across the lake fade from green to gray to a delicate violet, and the water copies them faithfully. On the pier, ropes rest like sleeping snakes beside the small rowing boat the previous owner left behind. The boat is a faded red, scuffed along the ribs, but seaworthy in the way of things that have belonged to the weather for a long time. Mara pours hot water over a spoon of chamomile and watches the blossoms float, little suns gone to seed. She carries the cup to the back steps and sits. The steps are warm from the last of the day. The world is unhurried. Sometimes it is enough to sit at the edge of things and not ask to be let in. She counts 5 pine trunks between the house and the path to the water. The 5th is curved, as if it once tried to look around a corner. A few yellow leaves have already decided their journey and rest on the ground like small letters someone has dropped and will not retrieve. Somewhere down the shore, a bird calls with the earnestness of a clarinet warming up. There is no reply, perhaps none is needed. At the first sip, Mara can feel her shoulders fall. It is the kind of falling that does not alarm the body, a falling into softness, into a chair that fits, into a voice that says, "You may." She breathes with the house. In and out. The lake breathes with them both. In and out. The rhythm is contagious. Soon even the small anxieties that had followed her, soft-footed, insistent, grow drowsy at the door and lie down. When the wind stirs, it carries a hint of rain from somewhere far across the hills. Not a storm, just the idea of moisture, like a story that has not yet decided to arrive. The first star reveals itself above the opposite bank, tentative and pleased to be noticed. Mara takes another sip and feels her mouth warm, her chest loosen, her hands stop rehearsing old arguments. There is nothing here to win. She thinks of the weeks before she came, the rush and clatter of clocks that had learned to scold. She had begun to feel like a window that could not open, glass fogged on both sides. But even that memory begins to fade as the evening finds its full shape. The lake holds the sky with such attention that both of them seem calmer for it. If stillness were a person, it would sit beside her on the step, not speaking, its sleeve just touching hers. Inside, she lights a lamp with a shade the color of unbleached linen. The room gathers around that gentle circle. Shadows become soft, not warnings but blankets, and the table looks sturdier in the glow, a friend who will not wobble when leaned upon. She slices an apple, and the crisp sound of the knife through the fruit is as bright as a small bell. She eats slowly, as if the apple were trying to inform her of something good she has always known. After the apple, she lays the slices of her day on the table, invisible but felt. The train that moved like a long sigh through the countryside, the path that listened to her footsteps, the key that turned easily, as if the lock were a throat clearing for a song. None of it requires judgment. She arranges the pieces until they seem to fit, like wood stacked with the grain all running one way. The bed in the corner is simple and honest. When she presses a palm to the quilt, it remembers other hands and warms to hers. She leaves the windows cracked to let the lake speak through the screens. The language is easy. A soft lap against the shore, a brush of reeds, a distant, contented creak from a dock that has settled into itself for the night. Before she sleeps, she walks to the pier. The boards hold her weight with a confident restraint, neither complaining nor boasting. The boat nudges the rope with a quiet nose, and Mara places a hand on its rim the way one greets a dog. "Hello," she says, and hears the word fall without a splash into the dark water, where it becomes part of a story that needs no plot. Fog begins to gather in faint veils, intimate as breath on glass. The opposite bank dissolves into suggestion. A fish turns in its slow, private thought and leaves a widening ring that reaches the pier's posts and makes them seem to pulse, as if the lake were a heart and the posts its clock. In this place, time does not end, it becomes comfortable. She returns to the house. The lamp sighs when she turns it low. The kettle, cooled, reflects the room in a soft, forgiving curve. Mara slides beneath the quilt and finds that the pillow is the right kind of quiet. The mattress gives an inch and then holds, like good advice. She listens to the window's small conversation with the night and feels words leave her mind the way leaves leave a tree, easily, because it is time. In the dark, she discovers she can remember the first lake she ever saw as a child. The memory arrives with the certainty of moonlight, a bright noon, a wooden railing, her mother's hand steady at her back, a dragonfly inspecting her with the professional curiosity of an angel. The surface trembled and smoothed, and she had decided then, without understanding, that this was how the world kept its promises. Tremble, smooth. Tremble, smooth. She does not try to hold the memory, she lets it rest beside her like a cat. Sleep pads into the room on gentle feet and sits at the edge of the bed, polite, patient. The house breathes again, and this time Mara breathes with it easily, as if they have practiced together for years. If there are thoughts that wish to be heavy, they find no hooks. They slide away, turning light as dust motes that rise and fall in a shaft of morning. The lake, the pines, the boat, the patient pier, all keep watch without effort. And so the first night gathers itself like a shawl around her shoulders. Outside, the star that came early now has company. Inside, the clock on the stove counts time in round numbers that do not matter. Mara's last waking notion is that silence is not empty, it is full of waiting kindness. She sleeps, and the house, satisfied, sleeps with her, breathing slow, the way water rocks a small boat when no one is looking. Morning is not a trumpet here, it is a soft hand smoothing the pillow. The lake brightens from slate to pearl, and the first birds practice 2 or 3 careful notes as if tuning themselves to the day. When Mara opens her eyes, the house has already noticed. Floorboards settle with a mild, conversational creak. The curtains hold a breath of pale light and let it go. Somewhere a pinecone drops, lands on its own shadow, and rolls a little, satisfied. She lies still for a while, learning the room again in morning language. The quilt smells faintly of sun, as if someone long ago had aired it across a chair in a tidy yard. The pillow has a memory of her head and is willing to remember again. Beyond the window, the lake lifts and lays down the smallest waves, as steady as a sleeper's chest. No clocks are scolding. Time here wears slippers. When she rises, the boards greet her feet with polite warmth. The kettle is a small moon on the stove, and when she fills it, the water is still cool with night. She lights the flame and watches the way heat begins as an idea and becomes an event, first a whisper, then a murmur, then the quiet confession of steam. She lays a teabag of lemon balm in a cup that has a hairline crack like a river on a map. The cup does not mind. Imperfect things do not panic here. They continue with calm, and their calm spreads. Breakfast is an apple cut into small moons and a heel of bread that accepts butter with gratitude. She eats by the open window. The air is shy and sweet, carrying a green note from the pines and a blue note from the water. Tiny spider threads stretch from the window frame to nowhere in particular, catching light the way kind words catch and hold a moment. After eating, Mara steps onto the back steps and listens to the day introduce itself. A dragonfly scribbles a silver signature in the air and forgets to stop. The lake clears its throat. Lap, hush, lap, hush. The hills keep their counsel. She thinks of how, in other places, weather is a headline, an announcement in bold type, a thing that arrives with a raised voice. Here, weather is always speaking, but quietly, offering small lessons to those who will sit a while and understand them. She begins to take those lessons. Lesson 1. Do. The grass beside the path is dressed in 1,000 very small mirrors. Each drop holds a sky, a pine, a piece of her hand when she lowers it. She brushes the tips and watches worlds tremble and reform. Do is the lake walking briefly on land. It teaches that sometimes a place comes to meet you, delicately, and you should notice. Lesson 2. A breeze. It moves first in the higher needles, rewriting the line between silence and sound. Then it climbs down the tree like a careful visitor, finds the shore, and folds itself into the water. The breeze teaches the art of almost, almost still, almost moving, and how much can happen in almosts. Lesson 3. A cloud. Over the ridge, a single, thoughtful cloud drifts with no agenda, carrying shade in its pocket like a spare handkerchief. When it passes over the lake, the water changes expression, from bright to soft, from open laughter to a smile with the lips closed. The cloud teaches that gentleness is not the absence of change but a kind of change that asks nothing in return. Mara walks to the pier. The boat, patient as always, swings an inch and stops. She loosens the rope and steps in, her weight greeted by the working creak that boats have used for centuries to say, "I will hold you." She rows without hurry, letting the oars find their own rhythm. The lake offers a very slight resistance, the kind a friend gives when they are almost ready to be hugged but want you to meet them halfway. She rows toward the center, where the water is deeper and differently colored, a quiet green that knows secrets but has no need to tell them. She stops and lets the boat drift. The boards beneath her knees have a friendly roughness, worked smooth by weather and hands. A heron lifts from a reed bed and follows the shore like a moving thought. Far across the water, someone's dog barks twice, decides the matter is resolved, and goes back to its mourning. When a ring of ripples approaches from some unseen fish, the boat acknowledges them with a soft nod and lets them pass. Movement here is not a demand, it is a conversation. She closes her eyes and listens to the boat's vocabulary. Tick, as a drop falls from the oarlock. Hush, as the hull rubs a ribbon of water into silk. Shish, as the breeze asks the reeds to lean together. She has the feeling of sitting in a language lesson taught by a good teacher, the kind who never raises a voice, who trusts that understanding will find its own timing if given space. Later, with the sun a little higher and warm as a hand on her shoulder, she rows back. The path from pier to house is simple and good. On the second pine, one of the 5 she counted last night, resin beads have formed, and they shine like amber buttons. Ants walk their sure roads across a fallen twig, unaware that they are crossing a bridge of no concern to them. She steps aside to give them the right of way, though they do not need it. Courtesy, like dew, is an offering. Inside, she finds a pencil and a notebook left empty by the previous owner. The paper has faint blue lines, gentle fences to keep her thoughts from wandering too far at once. She writes the date, then stops. What does one write here? Not lists, not proofs. She writes what the house suggests. The lake is thinking in small sentences today. She waits, hears the kettle approve faintly from the corner, then adds, every ripple an agreement. The words do not try to impress. They are already what they need to be. Around midday, light lays its quiet palm against the table, and the room glows with the patience of a library. Mara eats a simple soup she has assembled from onions, carrots, and thyme. The spoon makes a soft bell each time it meets the bowl. Between bites she looks at the walls and notices something she had missed. The wood, in places, is marked by long, light scratches, as if a cat had once considered the corners and decided they were part of its responsibilities. The marks do not need to be sanded away. The house keeps them as footnotes. A cat lived here, it took its work seriously. In the afternoon, clouds agree among themselves to become rain. There is no drama to it. The first drops arrive with a sense of having written ahead to ask if the time is convenient. When the rain begins in earnest, it is the kind that makes a piano out of everything it touches. Roof, leaves, water, steps, the overturned bucket near the boathouse. The lake, receiving rain, feels like a letter being written on, each drop a small, sincere word. Mara opens the windows wider to let the sound in. The house breathes deeper, pleased. She makes tea again and sits near the window, wrapped in a shawl whose ends have been taught by years to lie politely in her lap. Rain, she thinks, is the world's way of reminding us that the sky, too, comes down to rest. The scent of petrichor arrives like a kind memory. The pines darken, their green closer to blue, and the path becomes a ribbon of gloss. In the distance, the heron stands on one leg and permits the weather to write its name on its back. Rain is a generous teacher. It taps lightly when it has a small point to make. It drums when the point is larger. Today, the tapping becomes a steady drumming on the roof, and the house answers with its own somber music. The occasional drip from a place that always drips, the gutter's private song, the low hum of boards that remember other storms. Mara finds that her breath has matched the rhythm again. In and out. Rain breathes. She breathes. The kettle finally loosens a sigh. She writes in the notebook. Rain is punctuation. Commas on the steps, ellipses on the path, a paragraph on the roof. A smile arrives without needing permission. She adds, no exclamation points required. When the rain slackens to a quiet conversation, she puts on boots and a jacket and steps outside. The world is newly washed and still a little wet behind the ears. Every leaf holds a jewel. Every stone has decided to shine modestly. Along the shore, a small flotilla of pine needles has formed and is drifting south, a tiny fleet with no wars to fight. The air is cool against her face, and the breeze brings a note of lake mixed with pine, a simple chord played well. She walks the path that curves along the water. At one bend she finds a bench that has been politely waiting for her without expectation. She sits and watches the way the gray sky gradually adds threads of silver, then pale blue, then a white so clean it is almost transparent. Ducks move like commas along a sentence only they can read. Across the lake, a farmhouse tucks itself behind a row of trees and lets the day do most of the work. From the bench, Mara can see the house at a slight angle. Its roof still holds small, dark patches where the rain has not yet finished telling its story. In one window, the lamp she had left unlit reflects the world, a faint oval of outside brought indoors and offered back. She feels a very gentle tug in the center of her chest, the way one feels when a place you have just met begins to feel like a place that remembers you. As afternoon leans toward evening, the clouds open their palms and let light through like coins. The pier gleams in thin stripes where boards have dried unevenly, and the boat looks pleased in its red, newly rinsed skin. The wind, tired of talking, goes to lie down in the reeds. Somewhere in the not far distance, the dog offers a single bark and then, reconsidering, a small yawn. Back inside, she dries her boots and leaves them neatly by the door. She lights the lamp this time, welcoming the gold circle it casts across the table like a kept promise. Dinner is a gentle stew and a little cheese, and afterward she washes the bowl with the care one gives to useful companions. The kettle, faithful witness, watches from its post and shines where the lamp finds it. Twilight arrives with a librarian's soft step. Colors take off their shoes and whisper. Mara sits with the notebook again and writes a few more lines. Today I learned from dew to meet the morning halfway. From breeze, the grammar of almost. From cloud, the skill of carrying shade without complaint. From rain, the humility of punctuation. From the lake, the patience of mirrors. She closes the notebook and rests her hand on the cover, feeling how the day continues inside it for a while, like the sound of a bell after the bell is gone. Before bed, she walks once more to the pier. The night is younger than last night, if such a thing can be said. Its dark is tender rather than deep. The sky keeps a few careful stars in a pocket of clearing. The lake returns them stitched into a slightly different pattern, as if to suggest that reflection does not have to be exact to be true. She kneels and touches the water with 3 fingers. The coolness is kind and wakes nothing she does not wish to wake. On her way back, a small wind lifts the edge of her sleeve and sets it down again, an old aunt tucking in a child. She thanks it in the language of quiet, by noticing. The house receives her steps, remembers them, and makes room for sleep. Windows hold a little of the evening just to be sure the night finds the right address. When she lies down, the quilt, which knows the drill by now, drowses across her shoulders, and the pillow resumes its helpful work. Sleep comes as it should come. First to the hands, then to the elbows, then to the places behind the eyes where thoughts undress. The last thing she hears is not a thing but a shape, the shape of a room that breathes at the same pace as a lake, of boards that keep old stories without insisting on the details, of weather that knows how to teach without raising its voice. And as she goes under, she wonders, without words, how long a person can live like this before they begin to carry the calm with them wherever they go. The answer, the house suggests by simply breathing, is, as long as it takes. Morning drifts in as if it has tiptoed from another world, careful not to disturb what the night built. The first light folds itself through the curtains, silver at the edges, warm in the middle. The air smells faintly of pine resin and something new, a promise that doesn't hurry. Mara wakes slowly, as one returns from a far shore. The quilt slides away, whispering like a page turned in a quiet book. Her body feels rested in a way it hasn't for years, not just free of fatigue, but clean, as though every dream had rinsed her thoughts and set them neatly on a line to dry. The house stretches as she does. Somewhere deep in its beams a small pop sounds, wood expanding, settling, remembering that it too has survived another night. The kettle gleams expectantly in the dim kitchen light, already prepared for its daily task. Today, Mara feels a soft curiosity about the lake. There is a question in her, not a sharp one, not demanding an answer, just the kind that drifts near the surface of thought like a feather on water. What was here before me? She takes her tea to the pier again. The lake lies smooth, a calm gray mirror breathing slowly in the cool air. Morning mist still clings to the surface in pale ribbons, revealing and hiding the opposite shore in an unhurried rhythm. When the sun reaches higher, the mist thins and gathers its belongings, departing without fuss. Mara sits cross-legged on the pier, her reflection wavering beneath her, softer than a memory. She dips her fingers into the water, cold, fresh, awake. Rings spread outward, each one slower and quieter than the last until the lake forgets the disturbance. Somewhere in the ripples, she imagines, there are echoes of every hand that has ever touched this water. Fishermen rinsing their nets, children skipping stones, lovers tracing initials on the surface before the lake carried them away. The thought does not make her sad. It feels like being part of a gentle lineage, a long chain of quiet gestures. She leans forward, her chin on her knees, and listens. The lake speaks without words. It tells her about patience, about the art of holding everything, sunlight, wind, reflection, rain, and letting all of it pass through. A faint movement catches her eye. Something small beneath the water, gliding just above the stones. A fish, pale gold, unhurried. It moves with the gravity of a dream, neither hunting nor hiding. Mara watches until it disappears into deeper shade. She realizes, with a small smile, that she hasn't thought of her phone once since arriving. It lies forgotten in her bag somewhere in the house, a relic from another tempo. Here, conversation happens between water and wind, and both are excellent listeners. After breakfast, she decides to walk around the lake's edge. The path curves through pines, birches, and patches of moss that hold tiny worlds of green. Every few steps, the lake glimmers through the trees like an eye half open. The air carries the taste of cool metal and bark. She passes a small outcrop of stone where the moss grows thickest, and there she finds something curious, an old bench nearly swallowed by nature. Its wood has grayed into silver, and ferns reach up through the slats like careful fingers. She brushes away a few pine needles and sits. From this angle, the house is only a shape among trees, its roof a quiet line against the sky. The pier looks fragile and eternal at once. Mara sits for a long time. No one passes. The forest holds its breath around her. After a while, she opens the notebook she carries in her pocket. On a clean page, she writes, "Every still thing here is secretly moving." Then, after a pause, "The lake does not remember pain, only shapes that come and go." When she closes the notebook, she feels lighter, not because she has written something profound, but because she has written something honest. She keeps walking. The path narrows, then opens again. She notices a small wooden cross standing near the waterline, half hidden in reeds. Time has worn away the name carved there. Only a faint A remains, and the year, 1967. The wood leans but does not fall. She kneels. Around the cross lie smooth stones, arranged carefully, not by accident. Someone cared enough to make this place tidy even in grief. Mara touches one of the stones and finds it warm from the sun. She stays like that for a while, her hand on the stone, the waves barely moving. The air feels different here, not heavier, but older, like breath held for decades. She does not try to invent stories about who A was. It seems enough to know that someone had been loved enough to be remembered. When she stands again, she feels an unexpected calm. The lake watches her with mild curiosity, its face rippling in small sighs. The wind shifts direction and sends a coolness along her neck, the kind that makes one instinctively pause, as if to listen. On her way back, she notices something shining between the roots of a pine. She bends to look, a small piece of glass, green and rounded, worn by years of waves. She holds it to the light. It glows softly like a captured drop of sea. She pockets it without thinking, the way one accepts a gift without ceremony. By the time she returns to the house, the sun is lowering, the color of honey left in a jar. Shadows stretch and then rest. The kettle sings again. Its voice now feels like part of the day's grammar, a punctuation mark of warmth. She eats supper simply, bread, soup, a few berries. The rain begins again, gentle, almost apologetic. She opens the windows and lets it in. The air becomes soft and silver. Somewhere under the eaves, a bird takes shelter and chirps twice before settling. The sound of rain fills the spaces where thoughts used to be. It's the kind of rain that blurs edges, that teaches the eyes to rest. Mara sits by the window, tracing a circle on the fogged glass with her fingertip. The lake outside is now only suggestion, a presence rather than a sight. The world reduces to three tones: the hum of rain, the breath of wind, and the heartbeat of the house. She remembers her mother's voice from long ago, humming before sleep. A tune without lyrics, slow and looping, like waves. For a brief moment, Mara feels that same safety again. A belonging without condition, a kindness without speech. When the rain softens into drizzle, she goes to the door and steps onto the porch. The air smells of wood smoke and wet pine needles. The sky, washed clean, begins to reopen its blue, and the first star trembles above the far hill. She takes the piece of green glass from her pocket and holds it up toward that star. The two gleam together, one born of fire, one of time. In the reflection she sees her own face faintly, calm, unguarded, touched by both light and shadow. She whispers, not to anyone, but to the evening itself, "Thank you for keeping me." The words vanish into air, but the lake seems to understand. Its surface shivers once, approvingly. Back inside, she writes again before bed. The lake remembers everything gently. I am learning to do the same. She leaves the notebook open on the table, as though the night might wish to add its own line. Then she extinguishes the lamp and lies down. The quiet is rich now, not the silence of absence, but the silence of fullness, where every small sound has meaning. The kettle cooling, the wind folding itself away, the pulse of rainwater through the gutter, all part of one long breath. Sleep gathers her like a tide. And beneath that sleep, the lake continues to breathe, dreaming the same dream it has dreamt for centuries. The dream of holding everything and letting everything go. On the last evening before Mara is meant to leave, the day takes its time uncurling from the lake. It withdraws fingertip by fingertip, leaving behind warmth the way a hand leaves warmth on polished wood. The pines keep their dark music, and swallows stitch low arcs across the water as if finishing a hymn before night falls. Mara stands on the steps with the kettle cooling on the table behind her and understands, without the ache she once expected, that endings are only another room in the same house. She has packed a little, a sweater rolled like a soft thought, the notebook with its quiet sentences, a small cloth bag with bread and a wedge of cheese for tomorrow's train. The piece of green glass rests in her pocket as if it has always belonged there, and maybe it has. Maybe pockets were invented for precisely such found blessings. Twilight collects itself in the trees. The lamp inside the house waits for her hand, patient the way it has been patient every evening. But she decides to leave it unlit for now. The dark is gentle tonight, soft-shoed, courteous. She walks to the pier and sits with her feet drawn up, chin on her knees, like the first night but not the same person. The lake wears a gray so polished it takes on the sky's intentions. Far across, the farmhouse light pricks on. A small star has come to ground and is content there. A breeze arrives with the temperature of a kind thought. It moves through the reeds, asking nothing. In the distance a heron crosses, not in search of anything in particular, simply continuing the long sentence of its life. Mara matches her breath to the tiny wavelets that assemble and fall apart beneath the pier. In, out, in, out. She knows the rhythm now without counting. She has learned the household rituals of calm. She knows exactly how the kettle's first hum is an invitation and its final sigh a benediction. She knows the pace of the boards, how one plank always releases a faint echo when she steps from sun to shade. She knows that the fifth pine leans because it has been watching the path for so long that it became the path a little, and there is no harm in that. Tonight, she tells herself, she will not wish to keep anything. She will sit and let the lake pass through her one more time. That will be enough. Night draws near in two colors, a deepening blue above and a widening charcoal below. The first stars are shy, then less shy. Mara lets them arrive without counting. A moth finds her sleeve, rests, decides it has already traveled far enough for one day, and folds itself into a portable moon. The air picks up the faint clean scent of cold water and rock. It is the kind of night that makes one understand why stories, long ago, could begin with the word once and let the rest proceed as calmly as tide. She thinks of the cross with its single letter, the stones keeping company with someone she never knew. She thinks of the bench half swallowed by ferns, faithful to a view no longer requested. She thinks of the ant road and the amber buttons of resin, the dragonfly that inspected her with angelic professionalism on the very first morning. They do not come as a montage, as if racing past her eyes. They settle around her like relatives at a table, each taking the right-sized chair, nobody speaking over anyone else. When she stands, the boards give their usual quiet correction. Take smaller steps, they seem to say, there is no need to lean on tomorrow. She walks to the boat and puts a hand on its rim. It answers with a small, woody The rope is an old friend between them, not a leash, not a chain, only a reminder. She considers rowing out once more. But she senses the lake has moved closer tonight. It has come to meet her halfway to say what needs saying. So she remains on the pier. The house is a shape behind her, its windows dark, its attention turned outward in the way of good hosts who know that companionship sometimes means not standing in the doorway. A single cloud slips east, thin as moth wool, and makes a new texture of the stars. Somewhere, a fox places careful feet in leaf-muffled dirt, swift and temporary and eternal. Mara lowers her hand and touches the water. It is colder than before, unflinching and kind. The ripples move outward, and when they return, they are not the same ripples, and yet they are. She thinks. This is how gentleness survives, by not insisting on being identical to itself from one moment to the next. She speaks aloud, so softly that even the night has to lean in. I will go, and I will carry you. The lake does not answer in words. It answers as it always has, with an adjustment of light along its skin, with a slight bending of stars, with the patient acceptance of weight and its equally patient release. Its language is permission. Back inside, Mara lights the lamp at last. The shade gives the room its old linen afternoon even though night is fully here. She boils water and slices the last of the bread. The knife makes a brief, bell-clear note that drops to the floor and enters the house through the soles of her feet. She butters the bread and eats half of it standing up, as if prepared to share it with whoever comes in from the cold. No one does. That is fine. The room is full in a different way. She turns off the lamp and lets moonlight have its way with the floor. It makes a rectangle, then a more complicated shape when it finds the table leg, then something like a small map no one needs to follow. She lies down on the rug with her head near the open window. The air is almost sweet with tree breath. A train passes far away, not a summons, only a notation. Life continuing elsewhere. She falls into a waking rest, the kind that keeps the mind open for small arrivals. In that almost sleep, the house leans close and tells her its story in creaks and settled sighs. Not dates, not names, only the long fact of shelter. It has held storms and quiet, anger and milk, departures and clean sheets. It does not prefer one over the other. A good house is a pair of cupped hands. This one has been practicing. When she finally goes to bed, she leaves the window open the width of a palm. Cold enters with good manners and sits on the sill, not touching her unless invited. Sleep finds her quickly, and in that sleep she dreams of nothing dramatic. She dreams of a spoon ringing the lip of a cup, of a pine cone finishing a thought as it falls, of rain performing small punctuation across a roof, of a boat teaching the water a new word for hush. Sometime in the dark hours the wind shifts, and she wakes enough to notice without climbing the ladder to full consciousness. The lake is loud in the way quiet places sometimes are at night. A slap under the pier, a soft cry of something with wings, the gossip of reeds. She turns her face toward the window and lets the sounds braid themselves into dream again. Dawn is a pale idea when she opens her eyes. It has not fully decided to be day yet, it is only thinking about it kindly. She rises, makes tea, and takes it outside without a coat. The air kisses her with cool lips and forgives her for leaving soon. Mist is back on the water, friendly and absent-minded. The world is a whisper. She takes the notebook to the steps and writes a last page in a hand as unhurried as the lake. I came to the quiet house because I was afraid of the noise in my head. The lake taught me to listen for the quieter noise underneath the noise. There is a pace beneath pace. A breath beneath breath. I will keep that pace. I will breathe with what is around me, and what is around me will breathe back. She closes the notebook gently so as not to wake the sentences. Then she walks through the small rooms once more with an attention that feels like gratitude moving its elbows. She straightens a chair that will be crooked again by evening and thinks of the comfort of such inevitabilities. She wipes the rim of the kettle with a soft cloth, not because it needs it, but because goodbyes are made of small compliments. She touches the door frame with 2 fingers as she passes, an old habit she does not remember learning. At the threshold she pauses, listening for anything that might be unfinished. The house breathes. The lake answers. The day clears its throat. Nothing insists. She steps outside and pulls the door, leaving it unlocked for the next person the place decides to keep. On the path the dew is newly composed. Another set of tiny mirrors has been polished in the early gray. The 5th pine watches her go without leaning any farther. The boat stays as it has stayed all these days, slightly swung, satisfied with its agreement with rope and water. She says thank you without speaking and receives a reply that requires no ears. At the lane she stops and turns back. The house sits so modestly you would think it had only just arrived and might leave if no one needed it. She raises a hand and feels slightly foolish for a second, then not foolish at all. There are many rituals, this one will do. The walk to the small station is long enough for memory to finish packing. The road offers her pockets of birdsong and the dry rattle of seed heads. When the train comes it seems almost embarrassed by its own sound, as if apologizing to the trees for the interruption. She boards, finds a seat that accepts her weight without complaint, and sets the notebook on her knees. The lake slides away between trunks and then appears again in a gap, wearing that morning's pale face. It does not look back, places do not. Yet as the carriage turns, the water gathers the light and lays it out in a long stripe that seems, just for a moment, to travel with her. She understands that this is not illusion so much as choreography. The lake is not following, and she is not leaving. Something else is happening that has nothing to do with distance. Town comes with its baked smells, its newspaper corners, its traffic acting out a familiar play. Mara steps into it easily. She buys a second tea from a stall where steam speaks a faster dialect, and she is not angered by the speed. Speed has its own kindnesses. The relief of a long queue moving. The courtesy of a door held open by someone who does not know your name. While she waits for the connecting train, she opens the notebook and writes one last line below the last page, where the paper ends and the cardboard back begins. A sentence she wants to carry not just in ink but in conduct. The night stayed. She closes the cover. A little bird lands on the bench beside her and considers the knot in the wood with scholarly interest. When it flies, the bench seems to lift with it by the smallest amount, an agreement between weight and air. On the final train she watches fields go by, gold, then green, then the kind of brown that remembers rain. Houses gather and fall away, factories with their tall, serious chimneys, schoolyards still empty but rehearsing noise. The calm she brought begins to try itself out against these other rhythms and finds that it holds. She measures her breath with the same ruler she used at the lake, and the measure does not break. By the time she reaches her own street later that day, the city has drawn its patterns around her. The stairwell smells of old wood and someone's citrus soap. She opens her apartment and steps into a room that does not yet know about lakes. She sets the kettle on the stove, and it understands immediately. Kettles know each other's work. She opens a window and listens for a sound to replace the lap of water. In the distance, buses exhale. Somewhere below, a neighbor laughs. Overhead, a pigeon arranges its wings into a workable opinion. Mara waits for the first hum, the merest tremble, the moment when heat becomes voice. When it comes, she smiles. The lake is not gone. It is here, condensed into every small weather her life will offer. Steam on a pane, a breeze through a hallway, a glint of green glass on a windowsill catching late sun. She pours her tea and sits at the table with the notebook closed and the room assembling itself around her as patient rooms do. The night that stayed is not dark. It is a tenderness that gives shape to things, a stillness under the day's pulse, a shelter large enough to travel well in a pocket. The city outside continues, swift, sure, sometimes noisy, but beneath it, running like a current humans forget to name, is the same slow breath. She meets it with her own, and the two agree.